Well, you all have been asking and asking, and I'm pretty surprised. I didn't think that as many people would want to see this as was made known in the comments. Seemed like every video I posted, where's the Jetta, where's the Jetta, where's the dual mass flywheel and all that. Well, I finally got a dual mass flywheel, and now I finally just got around to actually doing the work. But I'm going to do a whole lot more than just a dual mass flywheel, as you can see, because I've got a whole bunch of stuff taken apart here. I'm doing the timing belt, doing the dual mass flywheel here, of course. Got the transmission out there. I'm replacing the AC condenser, which was damaged and leaking, so I can get my AC working again. We're going to change the fuel filter. We'll change the engine oil and filter. I'm going to put both front wheel bearings on it because they're starting to get a little bit noisy. We're going to put new shock absorbers on the front, and this thing should ride very well after I do all this work. I'm planning on keeping this car for quite a bit longer because I really like it. The fuel mileage is great. The handling is very tight. It's a fun car to drive, and it's just been a very, very reliable car. All these little issues that I'm dealing with here are just things that added up over time, but it never left me stranded. It never left me in a place where I had to find another ride home or another ride to work. This thing would always go, even if it had a rattling flywheel or a timing belt that was due to be changed, or AC that wasn't working, or a little howling wheel bearing, or some noisy struts in the cold. This thing always got me to and from point A to point B just fine. But now it's time to do some preventative maintenance work on it so I can go another 130, 150 miles, 150,000 miles. It's got 260 on it right now, so hopefully, fingers crossed, by the time it needs any more major work, provided I maintain it and keep up with it well and actually drive it this much, it'll have 400,000 on it before it's due for any more major work like this. Well, let me show you what we got here. First off, the part that everyone wants to know about is this flywheel. Now, this is called a dual mass flywheel. So rather than having a torque converter like conventional automatic transmissions have, which generate heat and generally result in a loss of efficiency until they lock, you have this dual mass flywheel. And basically what it is it's two pieces of flywheel here, hence dual mass, and one end is dampened with springs. But over time, these springs wear out and you get a rattling, clunking noise, most noticeable at idle speeds and when the vehicle is in park. In my case, as soon as I put it in drive, the noise went away, and that's why I just kept driving it. But it makes a noise like this. And see how that's moving around like that? Look at all the play that's in this thing. It's very loose. So that's what was causing the clunking noise, and the fix to this is just to replace this flywheel here. All the springs are inside here. I'll show you the new one here later on in the video. But that's what was causing the clunking noise. Now, this transmission wasn't too bad to get out. I had to get myself an engine hoist from good old Harbor Freight. And while I was up there, I got this little table jack. Man, this thing works sweet. All I had to do was get it up underneath the transmission, jack it up a little bit, take all the bolts loose, and then squeeze that little handle right there, which lowers it down. And the transmission came right out. There are no torque converter bolts that have to come out. It's just this little spline here that lines up with the outer end of the flywheel. And then you have a little bearing that this rides on. You want to check and make sure that's bearing's good, but in my case, I'm just going to replace it. The subframe came out, not too bad. You just got to disconnect the steering gear there from the shaft on the column. Both axle shafts came out. Didn't have to fight them, pulling them out of the transmission, because they have these bolts here that hold them in place. So you undo the bolts and the axle shafts come right off the transmission, which is super nice and easy. I took all the brake stuff apart as well, because over here you'll see I've got some more parts. I got a whole bunch of stuff laying around over here. There are the brake rotors, and the wheel bearings are still in here. I need to get my triple square sockets and undo these bolts so I can put the new wheel bearings in. on both sides. I'm just going to do both fronts while I'm at it. There's the charge air cooler, or the intercooler. And I did notice that there was a decent amount of water in this thing, so I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to prevent that. I've heard of issues with people hydrolocking their engines from the water building up in them. But that is a massive intercooler. Look how big that charge air cooler is. I did not expect it to be this big for a 2-liter diesel engine. That really surprised me. I thought maybe it'd be like, you know, like you see on the Equinoxes or the Malibus, just a little thing right there. Here's the AC condenser, which had the hole is on the other side here. But anyway, it was leaking freon. The AC wasn't working. Both headlamp assemblies are out. The fan over there is out. There's the radiator. At some point, I believe we hit a raccoon or something. I think that's what damaged the condenser, but you can also see it momentarily kind of push the fan into the radiator. It's not leaking and it's not damaged beyond cosmetics, so I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to keep using it. The starter comes out to get to one of the bolts to remove the transmission, and just a whole bunch of other stuff that comes off the front bumper cover. I know it really looks like a mess now, but it's really hasn't been that bad of a job. Over here in the back of the car, I've got the wheelhouse liners, the lug studs and caps, and just a whole bunch of random plastic pieces. The batteries sitting in there, the air filters up there. A lot of this stuff came from the wheelhouse liners and from under the hood. So that's all in the back of the car for now. So this is where I'm at. Been working on this, started about 9 this morning and then ran around looking for tools and some other parts for 2 or 3 hours. And it's about 5 o'clock right now. So I've probably got about 5 or 6 hours into it at this point, getting to this point, which I didn't think was too bad considering everything I had to do. And considering this is my first time doing all this. Now, obviously, the timing belt is on this side, so I'm going to put the transmission and everything back together and support this end of it before I take that side loose, take this motor mount loose, and start working on the timing belt here. Otherwise, the entire engine is going to be supported by this thing, and I'm not too comfortable doing that. I'd rather just support one side. So the timing belt will be later on, but I've got all the parts for it, and I got the special tools as well, so we should be able to take care of that, no problem. Overall, it's not as bad as I thought it would be. Of course, having the vehicle lift makes a huge difference. This would be a whole different ball game if I did not have the lift here. This is an Atlas Quick Bay 7,000 pound lift. Absolutely perfect for garages because there's no way I'd be able to get a 2-post lift in here with the thin concrete floors and the limited ceiling height. Even though that's an 8-foot door and a 10-foot ceiling, a 2-post lift just wouldn't work in here. But this thing works perfect. It's the best $2,000 I've ever spent in my garage. One thing that really surprised me is how hard it is to find triple square sockets. I believe that's what these are called, triple squares. I went to a hardware store, Lowe's and Home Depot, Menards. They didn't have them. I went to AutoZone. AutoZone didn't have them. I even went to Harbor Freight to get my engine support in a little cart there. They didn't have them either. So I had to drive all the way back to work to get these out of my toolbox from work because nobody had them. And I was really surprised. I thought, man, are these really this unusual of a tool to have? I guess they are. But anyway, you will need a set of triple square sockets, preferably deep and shallow, or just put an extension on it, whatever you want to do. But I like to have both just to make it easier. Got these off of Amazon. They weren't very expensive and they've worked great. I'm going to take the flywheel off of the car here and let's just take a closer look at it. And then we'll compare it to the new one and get the new one installed. Here are the two dual mass flywheels. I've got the old one on the left and the new one on the right. You see the new one has a little bit of surface rust. It's just been sitting in the truck, but no big deal. It's not going to hurt anything. Here's the old one over here, so you can see a lot more, almost like brake dust or like rust dust in it. Flip it over on the other side here. You can see they're pretty much the same. Not too terribly heavy, but just a little tip. Don't drop that on your foot, and that's just one more reason to wear closed-toed, steel-toe boots when you work on these things. I was prying it off or working it off the engine there, and it slipped out of my hand and landed on my foot. So I saved my concrete floor a good chunk, but it took a little toll on my boot. Nevertheless, my foot's okay, so wear the proper footwear. Anyway, back to these flywheels here. So you can see they've got little balancing weights on them. This one has 1, that one has 3, so these are weights to keep them perfectly balanced. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you the difference between the two of these, how there's play in the old one. The old one is loose here, and the new one is tight, and you can see where that noise was coming from, and the difference between the old and the new one. So we'll start with the old one here, roll it on over. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of play in this outside piece here, as I showed you earlier in the video. See how it moves around like that? Has a metallic noise to it. Okay, here's the new one. Nice and tight. It moves just a little bit, but you know, it's still snug with those springs. There's no metallic noise knocking back and forth or anything, and any movement that I do put on it is really stiff. So there's your difference between the old one and the new one. So this new flywheel should take care of our rattling noise at idle. Well, that's going to wrap this video up for now. One other thing I did do is put a new pilot bearing in there. Got the old one out and it was worn, so I'm glad I took the time and the effort to put the new one in. Wasn't too bad. I just heated it up a little bit and broke it loose, eventually got it out of there and was able to press the new one in. No big deal. Might as well do it while we're there. I'd hate to have the pilot bearing go bad and take this part all over again. Well, that's going to wrap this video up for now. I'll do a part 2 when everything starts going back together and when I start on the timing belt. And finally, get this work done on this vehicle. I know a lot of you have been waiting for this, so here you go. Anyways, hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. And I'll see you next time with part 2 of this vehicle. And we'll be going back together with the transmission and taking the timing belt off.